Yulee, Nassau County, Florida, home to 34-year-old mother of 3, Jolene Jensen Cummings, described as fun and always up for something social. Her friends said she was simply a kind, loyal, and caring person. She loved being a mother and called her children her proudest achievement. After giving birth to her daughter, sadly her relationship broke down and she decided she wanted a change. Jolene started working at Tangle's hair salon in Yulee, Florida and settled right in. The regulars loved her and her boss Jim said she was great with clients. She could talk to anyone. She then met her husband Jason Cummings and the pair had 2 boys. Her life was suddenly busier than ever. But in 2017, she and her husband Jason had agreed to part ways and separate, working on a custody plan together. She briefly had a relationship with a man who was also called Jason, but that too had come to an end after a string of arguments. Her friends said it was a shame. She was a great person, and sadly her relationships just weren't working out. But Jolene took everything in her stride. She was now focused on her children and career. She was looking for a fresh start and new beginnings. May 12, 2018, was business as usual for Jolene as she headed into a fully booked day at Tangle's. She was already looking forward to clocking off at 5 p.m. and getting ready for the next day. Not only was it her birthday, it coincided with Mother's Day too, and she was ready to spend all day with her children and catch up with everyone's birthday wishes. She and her children would spend the day making a gift for her own mom and having a real family day. The following morning, however, she was supposed to meet with her ex-husband to get their children, but she never turned up. Saturday was her busiest day. She was back to back, and maybe she just overslept, but a day later with still no word from Jolene and reported her missing. Her car was also missing, her bank records showed no activity, and her phone was just going to voicemail. Her boss Jim said that Jolene loved her kids more than anything, and there wasn't a chance she would have disappeared without something being really wrong. The first 2 people they wanted to speak to were her ex-husband Jason C. and her on-off boyfriend Jason G. Jason C. was very worried and cooperative, and he came down to the station right away. He said even if things had been testing for them as they navigated the split, his family was his priority and he respected her a lot. He had concerns about Jason G. calling him a junkie and saying he had heard bad things about the company he kept. He told police they could search whatever they wanted, his house, his phone, his car. He had absolutely nothing to hide. With a strong alibi and a look around his place, they were confident he was not involved. When it came to locating Jason G., however, this was more difficult. One of Jolene's neighbors said that on May 9th, just 3 days before she went missing, she had heard things smashing and Jolene shouting at her kids to shut the bedroom door. Alarm bells had gone off and she called the police. But once Jason G. heard the officers coming, he bolted. This was a big lead and they realized he was actually wanted on an outstanding warrant anyway. Finally, deputies found Jason G. hiding under some cardboard boxes inside a house and he was arrested for probation violations. He admitted they were involved in an argument after he showed up and invited asking to stay. When she told him no, he got aggressive and started slamming things. Police commented on the scratches and marks on his arm, but he said they had come from playing with his dog. He said he would let them search what they wanted and he would take a polygraph as well. However, he had now lost his phone and couldn't tell them where he'd been over the last few days and therefore could not give them an alibi. When police pointed out how this all looked to them, he said he wanted a lawyer. He was named as a person of interest in her disappearance. Frustratingly, tips were few and far between, with only a few coming in and none that led to anything. There were just so many gaps in this story. But on May 16th, investigators got their first break when they found Jolene's Ford SUV parked in a Home Depot parking lot about 2 miles away from her salon. Security footage from the area showed it being parked up at 1:15 a.m., several hours after Jolene would have finished her shift. Once the car was parked up, a figure dressed all in black ran away. Following the shadowy figure from camera to camera, they finally got a very clear image. A woman in all black had walked into a gas station a few minutes later where she asked to borrow her phone to call for a cab. She only stayed for a few minutes before leaving. It was obvious that she had been driving Jolene's car. So why park it up and leave if the intent was to steal it? The person that served her that night told the detectives it was one of the strangest conversations he'd ever had. She had spent a lot of time talking about what meth does to your body and sharing details about her night drinking with people. She talked and talked and talked before jumping into her cab. While investigators continued to look into these cameras, a thorough look over the salon painted a very bleak picture. There were huge pools of blood everywhere, and even though there had been an attempt to clean it up, there was no hiding this from the luminol. There was no other conclusion they could draw. Jolene was now dead, and she had been killed in this salon. They were now happy to rule out Jason G as well and a random break-in because it just didn't make any sense. The manager of the salon showed the police the work schedule, and the last person to have been working with Jolene was another stylist called Jennifer Sibbett. When investigators arrived to speak with Jennifer, she wasn't there, despite being set to open that day. Jim called Jennifer just as she was pulling into the parking lot. She took one look at the police and drove back out. She then told Jim she was quitting. They'd never see her again, and she wanted her final paycheck. Detectives showed everyone in the cell on the CCTV footage from the gas station, and without missing a beat, they said absolutely it was Jennifer. Except she did have different hair. Jim gave them her address, but the address didn't even exist, and they had no idea where Jennifer now was. She was returning no phone calls, was the last person to see Jolene, was giving out fake addresses, and had been seen parking Jolene's car. Jennifer Sibbett had only been at the salon for just over a month and kept to herself by all accounts. She was new to the area and no one really knew anything about her. Jennifer, for some reason, definitely didn't like Jolene. One client said that as Jolene was washing her hair, Jennifer inserted herself into their conversation and was incredibly nasty to her for no reason. Other colleagues saw this bully-like behavior a lot, and it seemed the new girl was bothering everyone. One of Jolene's colleagues called Jennifer crazy and said she put everyone on edge. Her behavior and constantly changing appearances made her mind go to weird places. I felt like she killed somebody and she's on the run, she said. Put simply, this was a small-town family-oriented salon and Jennifer did not fit in, nor did she want to. The former boss said she was definitely over the top with a lot of quirks. She once ate a pound of beef using her bare hands and ended up storming out, never to return, all over some sliced lemons. Before she was at Tangles, she worked at another salon, and coworkers there said they too often felt uncomfortable working with her. She was paranoid, had severe mood swings, and they knew she got the job using false information, which unnerved everyone. And just a couple of days before she went missing, Jolene had been overheard saying to Jennifer, "Go away, I don't like you. You're crazy, you're fake." Jolene sent another friend a text about Jennifer saying, "She is really just smart-mouthing towards everyone. I'm trying to avoid her and she's being real negative. There's something a little off about her. I can't put my finger on it." After placing a BOLO or be on the lookout for Jennifer's car, they finally tracked her down. She was miles away, sleeping rough in her car in a gas station. She had injuries to her face and body that looked consistent with being in a fight. They were able to arrest her on an auto theft charge. But there was more to it. Everyone's eyes were on Jennifer Sibbett. Except they realized they weren't talking to Jennifer Sibbett. They were actually talking to Kimberly Kessler, and she had been reported missing herself back in 2004 in Butler County by her mother. She was very self-assured, bordering on arrogant, loved to talk about herself, and had an answer for everything. They asked her why she had left town and changed her name, and Kimberly said it was to stop her ex from finding her. She had settled on the name Jennifer Sibbett after reading it on a tombstone. Jennifer was actually a little girl that had been killed in a car accident. As odd as the story already was, this was far from her only name change. Kimberly Kessler actually had 25 different aliases, 5 driver's licenses across 33 cities in 14 states, alongside fake social security numbers. She would drastically change her appearance too, wearing different wigs and cutting and dyeing her hair, before moving away and starting somewhere new. She said she had no idea where Jolene could be, and didn't even admit to stealing her car, despite the cameras showing she quite clearly did. At one point, she randomly accused Jolene of being a meth addict, something which everyone said was absolutely ridiculous. But just as they thought they might be getting somewhere, as soon as they turned the pressure up, Kimberly wanted a lawyer. But this was not a problem for the police, as more CCTV was starting to fill in the gaps. Near the bins around the back of the salon, she was seen throwing bags in on the day Jolene vanished. They wanted to find out exactly where the trucks had taken the bins once they had been emptied, and it led them to a huge landfill with almost 4 million pounds of trash. Their hearts sank. This was simply going to be an impossible task. In the trees near the bins, they found the lid to a large plastic container, and when they finally got Kimberly's real address and a storage unit that she had recently rented, they were shocked at just how much they had found. Many items were covered in blood. A quick turnaround showed the DNA was a match to Jolene, and inside the rest of the container they found Jolene's fingernail. A bag was also discovered with scissors in them with yet more blood. Testing had now confirmed that some of the blood in the salon was a match to Kimberly as well as Jolene. They believed that the scissors were the murder weapon. More searches on Kimberly's iPhone showed that she had taken pictures of a notebook where she had written pages and pages of names. One of the names was as old as an ex-boyfriend from school. Some of them had Satan, witch, and evil written next to them. Kimberly would often write down her dreams and talk about demons, Jesus, and stalkers. Searches on her computer were for nobody, no crime, female serial killers, and Jolene's name a handful of times. Her house had turned up 6 different wigs and several other phones. Speaking to more people that knew her various identities, painted a picture of a violent and frightening woman. An ex-boyfriend said that she had matter-of-factly told him she shot her own cat with a shotgun, and as a child she had threatened to kill someone's brother with a baseball bat when he was sleeping. As strong as this case was looking against Kimberly, they still didn't know where Jolene's body was. Some more cameras from inside the Walmart would give them an idea. Footage showed Kimberly buying $30 worth of supplies, including ammonia, zip ties, and an electric knife. This was at around 9 p.m., about 4 hours after Jolene would have finished her shift and after they believed she had been killed. Kimberly then drove back to the salon, and at 11 p.m., she was spotted throwing some very heavy bags into the bin. Police said that given the amount of blood in the salon and the electric knife, they could only assume that Kimberly had dismembered Jolene and put her body into bags. On May 22nd, a news conference was held where police confirmed that while they were still looking for Jolene, they knew she would not be coming home alive. They now felt that Kimberly had been planning to kill Jolene for a few days. Given her search history and the fact that the day Jolene was last seen coincided with the salon being shut for 2 days, police were sure she had planned it to give her time to clean up and figure out her plan. Kimberly Kessler was charged with first-degree murder, and even as she sat with handcuffs on her, she was chatting and joking as if she was talking to friends. From jail, she would often talk to reporters and her mother. She was still denying it all, and it seems she couldn't care less about being in a jail cell. Jail officers said that she would regularly strip naked, spread feces on the window of her cell, and once had to be stopped with pepper spray. After going on hunger strike for fear people were going to poison her, her weight had dropped from 196 pounds to just 74 pounds. After declaring her mentally incompetent to go to trial, the judge later said Kimberly was capable of understanding the case against her. The sheriff said she was playing crazy and she was acting crazy. She always thought that she was the smartest person in the room and she knew exactly what she was doing. A psychiatric nurse said her behavior was well thought out and clever, but just not quite enough for people in the know. To the relief of those that knew Jolene, 3 months later, it was eventually determined that Kimberly would stand trial, and to no one's surprise it would be far from smooth sailing. The now 53-year-old had refused to participate in any proceedings and frequently created disruptions in the court. She wouldn't even cooperate with her own lawyers anymore. But this was about justice for Jolene, and the judge would not tolerate this behavior. Everything carried on, and Kimberly would spend most of the trial in a separate room, watching via a video link. The prosecution had a few theories about why this had all happened, one of which was that Jolene didn't trust who she thought was Jennifer. She was onto her and knew something was up. She had already challenged her by calling her fake, and it looked like Kimberly's years of running were starting to catch up with her, and she couldn't risk being exposed. Another theory was that Kimberly was also very jealous of Jolene, jealous of her life, jealous of how much her clients loved her, and she just wanted her gone. Her public defender said that yes, it was clear there had been a fight. He was not disputing that. But to get a first-degree murder conviction there needed to be proof of premeditation. And he said that the state simply could not prove that. And there was still nobody to prove a time of death or cause. The jury found Kimberly Kessler guilty of first-degree murder and grand theft auto. She was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Kimberly was transferred to another jail. Much to the relief of the people who have been dealing with her, Jolene's remains have never been found, and sadly it seems unlikely that they ever will be. After being open 10 years, Tangle's hair salon closed its doors permanently, after the company that held the lease refused to work with them anymore. But the owner and colleagues said that so much had happened that carrying on without Jolene felt too sad anyway. It would not be the same. It's too heartbreaking without Jolene at this point anyway, said the business viral statement on Facebook. Jolene's daughter now lives with her grandmother, and Jolene's sons are with her ex-husband Jason. In a recorded interview, Jason said he fell in love with her because she was such a good mother to her daughter. She taught him how to be a great dad, and he makes sure their sons talk about her all the time. If you could say one more thing to Jolene, what would it be? The interviewer asked. I don't even think you'll have enough film in that camera. Jason smiled, said the world no longer feels as safe as it once did. When your child is murdered, grief is only the beginning. But she still feels her daughter talking to her and guiding her. The children are surrounded by Jolene's pictures. While I know Jolene's soul is in heaven, I feel her spirit is here, watching over her children. Sometimes I hear her say, Mom, do this or do that. Kiss and hug the kids for me. It brings a smile to my face and tears to my eyes. Robert Hansen was born in Esterville, Iowa in 1939. He was the son of a Danish immigrant and followed in his father's footsteps as a baker. He was often ridiculed and bullied by his peers. He was very shy, smaller than his fellow classmates, suffered from a stutter, and had severe acne that left him permanently scarred. He was described as being quiet and a loner and had a strange relationship with his domineering father. Since he didn't receive attention he wanted from the girls in school, he grew up hating females and longed for revenge. He had no close friends in school, and when he graduated high school in 1957, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserve. He received advanced training as a military police officer at Fort Knox, where he became a skilled marksman. However, he was discharged after only serving 1 year. While enlisted in the Army, he was known to frequent prostitutes in the area, but he told fellow soldiers he found them dissatisfying and yearned to take more control of the situation. He later worked as an assistant drill instructor at a police academy in Pocahontas, Iowa. There, he began a relationship with a younger woman and the two would marry in 1960. On December 7, 1960, he was arrested for burning down the school bus garage of his local high school. Revenge for his unpopularity in school. A friend turned him in, but he would serve less than 2 years in prison. While in prison, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with periodic schizophrenic episodes. The psychiatrist also noted that Hansen had an infantile personality and was obsessed with getting back at people he felt had wronged him. While incarcerated, his wife would file for divorce. Over the next few years, he was jailed several times for petty theft and would marry once again. This time to Darla Hendrickson, and they would have 2 children. Darla was a deeply religious woman who had earned a master's degree in education and tutored children for income. She later said she knew Hansen was up to no good, but she just thought his dirty secret was picking up prostitutes in the middle of the night before going to work. In 1967, the family moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where he would become very well liked by his neighbors and set several local hunting records. Darla and the children would regularly go to Arkansas during the summer each year, leaving Hansen behind. In 1971, he was arrested for abducting and attempting to rape a woman, and then for sexually assaulting a sex worker. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but after only serving 6 months, he was placed on a work release program and released to a halfway house. In 1976, he was caught stealing a chainsaw from an Anchorage Fred Meyer store. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and required to receive psychiatric treatment for his bipolar disorder and was released after only 1 year. In the early 1980s, he reported a burglary on his home which he had actually staged. With the money he got from the insurance company, he opened up a bakery of his own and established himself as a well-liked family man. In January 1982, he bought himself a Piper Super Club bush plane and would regularly fly it even though he had been denied a license due to his medication. He gained the nickname Butcher Baker for abducting and hunting down women in the wilderness just north of Anchorage through the early 1980s, when the state's largest city was booming because of construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Over time, he would become more selective of his victims, eventually learning that targeting sex workers and exotic dancers were less likely to get him caught because they were less likely to be believed by the authorities if they reported being raped or attacked. Many of the women were transients who came up to Alaska or runaways, and sometimes they were linked to organized crime and their families were unaware of where they were. His MO was to pick up sex workers or exotic dancers in his car and force them at gunpoint to his bush plane where he would fly them to his shack in the Nick River area of the Matanuska Valley. He would then sexually assault them and then release them into the wilderness to hunt and kill them as if they were wild game. In 1983, he offered 17-year-old Cindy Paulson $200 to perform a sexual act, but when she got into the car, he pulled a gun on her and drove her to his home in Anchorage. His wife and children were vacationing in Europe at the time and he had the house all to himself. While handcuffed to a post in his basement, he raped and tortured her. Afterward, he drove her to the Merrill Field Airport and told her he planned to take her out to his cabin. While Cindy was crouched in the back seat of the car with her wrist cuffed in front of her body, she saw a chance to escape when he was busy loading the airplane. While his back was turned, she crawled out of the back seat, opened the driver's side door, and ran toward the nearby Fifth Avenue. She later told police that she had left her blue sneakers on the passenger side floor of the sedan's back seat as evidence that she had been in the car. Hansen panicked and chased her, but she made it to Fifth Avenue first and managed to flag down a passing truck. The driver of the truck was alarmed by Cindy's appearance, stopped and picked her up, and then drove her to the mush inn where she jumped out of the truck and ran inside. She then begged the clerk to call someone for her, which turned out to be her pimp. The truck driver then left and called the police to report the incident. When police officers arrived at the Mush Inn, they were told that the girl had taken a cab to the Big Timber Motel. When officers arrived at that motel, they found Cindy in room 110, still handcuffed and alone. She was then taken to the police station where she described the perpetrator. Cindy made a formal statement to the police and not only identified the make and color of the plane, but also remembered its tail number. However, she was initially not taken seriously by cops because she was a young sex worker and they were considered untrustworthy. Still, the house she described was quickly identified as belonging to Hansen. When questioned by police, Hansen was outraged and insisted she was lying to extort money from him. He also questioned whether it was even possible to rape a prostitute. He claimed he had an alibi and told investigators his wife and children were in Europe and he spent the night playing poker with friends. When questioned, the two men from the alleged poker game substantiated his story. Hansen allowed authorities to search his home, but they didn't find evidence of what the victim described. She also refused to take a polygraph, and this made the police wonder if she fabricated the story. It was a he-said-she-said case because they had no evidence. Citing a lack of evidence, the prosecutor dropped the case. Meanwhile, Alaska state troopers had been investigating several bodies that had been found in and around Anchorage, Seward, and the Matsu Valley area. The first of the bodies was found by construction workers near Eklutna Road and was dubbed Eklutna Annie by investigators, and to this day has never been identified. Later that year, the body of Joanna Messina was found in a gravel pit near Seward, and in 1982, the remains of 23-year-old Sherry Morrow were discovered in a shallow grave near the Nick River. Police had 3 bodies and what looked like one killer. The FBI would create a criminal psychological profile based on the 3 recovered bodies. The FBI profiler described the killer as having low self-esteem, a history of rejection by women, and being an experienced hunter. He also correctly predicted that he would take souvenirs from his victims and would have a stutter. Using this profile, the lead detective investigated possible suspects, and this would eventually lead him to Hansen, who fit the profile and owned a plane. The 2 men who gave Hansen an alibi for the night he attacked Sandy Paulson confessed that they had been lying. Both friends said they were covering for him because they thought he was a legitimate guy and they believed him when he said he thought the dancers were trying to extort him. Police obtained a warrant to search his plane, vehicles, and home. On October 27, 1983, investigators uncovered jewelry belonging to some of the missing women, as well as an array of firearms in a corner hideaway of his attic. Also found was an aeronautical chart with 37 little X marks on it hidden behind Hansen's headboard. Many of these marks match sites where prior bodies had been found. When confronted with the evidence found in his home, he denied it as long as he could, but he eventually began to blame the women and tried to justify his actions. He would eventually start confessing to each item of evidence as it was presented to him, and admitted to a spree of attacks against Alaskan women starting in 1971. Hansen's earliest victims were young women, usually between 16 and 19, and not prostitutes, unlike the victims who led to his discovery. When an FBI forensic lab matched the shell casings found near the victims to the many 14 found in Hansen's house, he made a plea bargain. At this time, only Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Paula Golding, and Jane Doe of Klutna Annie's remains were found, and he would be charged for each of their murders. He also confessed to the abduction and rape of Cindy Paulson. He then agreed to confess to all of the crimes, give details about each of his victims, and show the burial sites marked on his map in exchange for serving his sentence in a federal prison and avoiding media publicity. Another condition of the plea bargain required him to decipher the markings on his aviation map and help locate his victims' bodies. During questioning, Hansen claimed that starting in 1973, after finishing his rape sentence, he became a serial rapist, picking up prostitutes in Anchorage and taking them to the wilderness in his bush plane where he would rape and torture them. He later claimed that the ones who complied would be returned to Anchorage alive and those who didn't, he would kill. From 1973 to 1983, he abducted and raped at least 30 women with that method and then let them go. However, at least 17 women picked up during the years of 1980 to 1983 were less fortunate. He showed the police 17 of his burial sites, but there were more than 17 marks on his map, suggesting he had more victims than he admitted to, but he refused to help them with the others. It has been theorized that he wouldn't confess to killing them because they were neither prostitutes nor strippers, and he couldn't justify their murders to himself. The victims that were found were exhumed and returned to their families. Hansen was sentenced by jury to 461 years plus life in prison without the possibility of parole, and he would die on August 21, 2014 at the age of 75 from natural causes. In August 2014, one of his young unidentified victims, known as Horseshoe Harriet, was exhumed and a DNA sample was taken and uploaded into Cody's, but no matches were found. In August 2021, her DNA profile was uploaded into a public genetic genealogy database. She became known as Horseshoe Harriet when her remains were found in 1984 by Horseshoe Lake near Anchorage, after getting several close matches of a few potential relatives that currently live in Alaska and Arkansas. A family tree for the victim was constructed. Genealogy research indicated that the victim might be a woman named Robin Pelkey, and then DNA analysis completed by Paribon Nanolabs in September 2021 would confirm this. Robin was 19 years old and living on the streets of Anchorage when she was killed by Hansen in the early 1980s. Robin was born in 1963 in Colorado, and records indicate that she had been living in Anchorage in the early 1980s when Hansen was active. Sadly, she was never reported as missing. The following are 16 more women that are probable murder victims of Hansen. Celia Bath Van Zanten was a 17-year-old who was abducted and killed on December 22, 1971, while walking from her house to a local convenience store. Her body was found by hikers 3 days later on Christmas Day. She was still alive when she was either thrown or fell into a ravine. She apparently tried to climb out, but with her hands tied behind her back, she had no way to pull herself up the cliff, and she repeatedly fell until she froze to death in the frigid December weather. Investigators discovered tire tracks turning lazy circles in the parking lot of the campground, and they believed Beth escaped her attacker, ran down the steep slope, and probably fell into the ravine. Her abductors circled the parking lot, waiting for her to reappear, but when she never did, he finally left. Soon after her murder, 18-year-old Sandra Patterson, the daughter of an Alaska state trooper, came forward to report her abduction on December 19th. Sandra worked as a prostitute to support her heroin addiction. She was working in the parking lot of the Nevada Club in Anchorage when a man pointed a gun at her and told her he would kill her if she didn't do what he wanted. She described her attacker as a slender man in his mid-20s wearing horn-rimmed glasses. The man drove Sandra to a motel on the Canoe Peninsula nearly 100 miles south of Anchorage and raped her. On the drive back to Anchorage, he threatened to kill her if she reported him to the police. Sandra complied with his demands to remain silent until she heard about Beth's murder, and then she knew she had to come forward and tell authorities about her abduction. Police asked Sandra to study a book of photos of non-sex offenders to see if she could pick out the man who had kidnapped and raped her. She immediately identified her attacker as Robert Hansen. Hansen's photo was in the book because he was awaiting trial for the attempted kidnapping of a young Anchorage woman. Hansen was initially charged with kidnapping and raping Sandra Patterson, but prosecutors considered her an unreliable witness, and the charges were eventually dropped. Meanwhile, nothing tied Hansen to the murder and abduction of Beth other than an X on his aviation map. Megan Shaban-Emmerich was also a 17-year-old who was last seen in Seward, Alaska on July 7, 1973. She was a student at the Seward Skills Center, now called the Alaska Vocational Technical Center, and was last seen walking out of a dormitory laundry room. Hansen admitted he was in Seward the day Megan disappeared, but he denied any involvement in her case. Her body has never been found, and it is believed he did not admit to her murder, because she was not a prostitute or exotic dancer, but instead was a college student and he could not justify her murder to himself. Mary Kathleen Teal is a 22-year-old who was last seen on July 5, 1975. Her husband was away working on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and she asked a friend to give her a ride into town and was dropped off at the bakery. Another friend saw her at the waterfall on Lowell Point Road between 1:30 and 2 o'clock p.m. She has never been heard from again. Hansen denied killing her, but he is suspected to have abducted and killed her. Joanna Messina is a 24-year-old who went missing on May 19, 1980. Her decomposed body was found 2 months later in a gravel pit near Kenny Lake, just south of Moose Pass. A dental assistant by training, she was broke and alone when Hansen tried to pick her up on the sewer dock. Hansen didn't initially have any nefarious intentions with her, and instead actually wanted to go on a normal date, which she agreed to. However, Joanna couldn't stay in town because she had a cannery job call the following day and needed to get back to her campsite. When she asked Hansen for money, things quickly went south because in his mind, that made her a prostitute. So he killed Joanna, hastily buried her in a gravel pit, and then he killed her dog. Roxanne Eastland is a 24-year-old who went missing on June 28, 1980. She had been staying for the past 2 weeks with her boyfriend at the Budget Motel on Spenard Road in Anchorage, Alaska, and was supposed to meet with an unidentified male on 4th Avenue downtown that day. Hansen confessed to killing her, but her body has never been found. Lisa Futrell is a 41-year-old who was last seen on September 6, 1980. Her body was found in May of 1984, south of Old Nick Bridge, after Hansen told authorities where they could find her. Sadly, there is no additional information in her case. Sherry Morrow is a 23-year-old who was an exotic dancer in a seedy area of Anchorage known as 4th Avenue. On the night of May 30, 2016, Bridget left her house. At around 10:30 p.m., she sent a Snapchat message saying she was too pretty to walk in the grass. A few minutes later, she called a friend who later stated that she seemed fine with nothing amiss. Around 1:30 a.m., a man called 911 to report hearing multiple gunshots at the park. Then, just before 7 a.m., Bridget's naked body was found in the park, not by people, but by stray dogs. Although there were no reports of the dogs eating her, they circled the body. A man passing through the park shooed the dogs away, and shortly after, Atlanta homicide detectives arrived at the scene. After the discovery of her body, the police immediately began canvassing the area for witnesses and clues. However, no personal effects were found on or around the victim, leaving investigators with little to go on besides her wounds. Now the autopsy revealed some troubling details. There wasn't any evidence of violations, but it indicated that some of the gunshots came from a straight-down angle, suggesting that Bridget was already likely on the ground, possibly dead, when she was shot multiple times. The police say it appeared as if Bridget was running away from her killer when she was gunned down. The choice of ammunition, radically invasive projectiles, also known as RIP bullets, raised eyebrows. These bullets are designed to fragment upon impact, causing extensive damage. Their use in the crime led investigators to consider whether a message was being sent. As the investigation progressed, Bridget was identified as the victim, thanks in part to one of her tattoos, which barely read her name. Detectives received reports from neighbors who claimed to have seen individuals escorting her through the park around 11:30 p.m. on the night of her murder. Surveillance footage from a Shell gas station in Stone Mountain, Georgia also confirmed this. It showed Bridget with two black males who were the last known people to see her alive. One of the men with her looked to be between 20 and 30 years old with a goatee and wearing a white t-shirt. Police said there was no clear description of the other man. Witnesses described Bridget as looking unhappy during this encounter. On the day after these sightings, on June 1, 2016, Atlanta police confirmed that the car seen at the gas station belonged to Bridget. Interestingly, the vehicle was found behind King's Southern Delight restaurant on Red Dan Road in DeKalb County, which is about 2 miles from where she was last seen with the two individuals, and approximately 20 miles from where her body was discovered. Despite the discovery of her car, investigators have not released any information about potential DNA evidence found inside. So who exactly was behind this? And who were those two men? Now the detectives had to understand Bridget's journey, especially after she moved to Atlanta. She pursued her dream of becoming a model and even landed a role as an Amber Rose lookalike in one of the music videos from Chris Waddle. In short, it seemed like her dreams were coming true. But there was a darker side to her story too. A simple online search revealed something unexpected. Turns out there were ads on Backpage featuring Bridget in revealing outfits, hinting at involvement in escort services. This shocked her friends who had no idea about this side of Bridget's life. Her grandmother, Beverly Toole, had a theory. She believed that Bridget might not have been acting of her own free will. She suspected that Bridget's boyfriend might have influenced her decisions. So the attention of detectives turned to Bridget's 21-year-old boyfriend, Kevin Kinney. Bridget's friends had a lot to say about Kevin, her boyfriend. He was older, had a history of legal troubles, and there were rumors that he might be involved in a gang. There were even reports suggesting that their relationship was volatile. Just a few months before Bridget's murder, she called 911 to report an assault by Kevin. She told police that Kevin hit her in the face, but decided not to press charges. However, just 2 days later, police were called to the same home because Bridget was fighting with another woman, Brittany Aloka, who turned out to be the mother of Kevin's child. It seemed like there was a complicated love triangle involving Bridget, Kevin, and Brittany. Before her death, Bridget was living with Kevin and Brittany, which likely contributed to the domestic disputes. A friend of Bridget's revealed that there might have been another major source of tension, the fact that Bridget was pregnant. She was afraid and hesitant to tell Kevin about the pregnancy, indicating it was a recent development, just weeks before her tragic death. But someone like Kevin couldn't be able to live with his current girlfriend and his child's mother without some friction between everyone involved. Now the police took Kevin and Brittany in for interrogation, but they haven't been named as suspects and no charges were filed. Brittany declined to comment, focusing on being a mother. Kevin claimed he was cleared as a suspect after the interrogation, surprising many. The police, however, remained silent about their investigation. Kevin denied being a suspect and claimed he was cleared by the police. He seemed surprised by the allegations against him. He mentioned a unique living situation with Bridget and Brittany living together. There were multiple incidents of domestic disputes involving the three of them. However, Kevin denied these allegations. He denied knowing about Bridget's involvement in the escort business, claiming he tried to keep her away from it. Kevin stated that he wasn't aware of Bridget's apparent pregnancy and denied discussing it with her, unaware of the fact that the autopsy revealed that she was not pregnant. Kevin expressed frustration, saying he wished he could confront everyone involved. He said that when he came to know about Bridget's death, he found the situation quite dramatic and took a while to respond because he didn't know what to say. He denied any harm towards Bridget and expressed his desire to marry her if she were still alive. Even though he had been cleared by the police, they never explicitly told him so. But in the immediate aftermath, police had some ideas and by his own admission, Bridget's boyfriend, Kevin Kinney, the court's #1 suspect. The next set of questions that the cops had was his involvement with gangs, to which he strongly denied any affiliation. He admitted to having served time in jail for non-violent offenses, but insisted he had nothing to do with Bridget's murder. Kevin even said that Bridget had expressed fear for her life before her death, but didn't know who she was afraid of. He also suggested that Bridget may have rejected someone's advances, leading to her murder, but all of these theories had no concrete answers. Unfortunately, with no progress being made, the case went cold for almost 2 years. On May 31st, 2018, 2 years after Bridget's tragic murder, new developments emerged, shedding light on the case that had baffled investigators. According to Atlanta police, surveillance footage captured Bridget's car in a parking lot. In the footage, a woman was seen entering a store and purchasing a Sprite. Now not far from the vehicle, near a fence, authorities discovered a dress. They also recovered a Sprite bottle. The crucial breakthrough came when DNA evidence recovered from Bridget exactly matched the DNA found on the Sprite bottle. This discovery marked a significant step forward in the investigation. But this wasn't the end of the story. As a matter of fact, the investigation into Bridget's murder led authorities to uncover another case involving the disturbing murder of an elderly couple, which happened on October 24, 2016. Sylvia Watson and her fiancé Samuel White were victims of a horrific crime perpetrated by members of the Roland 20 Street gang. The suspects, including Christopher Crisco Spencer, forced Watson to drive to multiple ATMs to withdraw money before returning to her apartment. Once there, Spencer and another man, Vernon Vito Corleone Beeman, bound the couple and shot them execution style in the back of the head. Christopher Spencer was arrested on November 2, 2016 and charged in connection with the murders of Sylvia Watson and Samuel White. Following his conviction, Spencer was incarcerated at Macon State Prison. It was during this time that Spencer's DNA submitted to a database, matched DNA found on Bridget's body, and the Sprite bottle recovered near her vehicle. This crucial DNA match prompted authorities to secure an arrest warrant for Spencer in connection with Bridget's murder on May 30, 2018. Detective O'Connor, involved in the investigation, explained that prior to Spencer's arrest and the elderly couple's murder, there were very few leads and little information regarding Bridget's case. Surveillance footage from the convenience store showed that the suspects were cautious, having someone else buy the items they needed without leaving the vehicle. This caution made it challenging for investigators to gather evidence initially. However, with Spencer's identification and arrest, a breakthrough finally occurred in Bridget's case. Despite the DNA evidence linking Spencer to Bridget's murder, many questions remain unanswered. It's unclear why Bridget was targeted, and Spencer denies any involvement in her death. Spencer was already facing a life sentence when he was charged for Bridget's case. While Spencer is associated with the Roland 20s gang, authorities believe Bridget's murder is unrelated to gang activity. In March 2018, Spencer faced further charges, along with 8 other alleged gang members, in connection with the murder of 2 youths in Jonesboro in 2016. Bridget's grandmother, Beverly Toole, expressed a mix of emotions upon learning about Christopher Spencer's arrest in connection with Bridget's murder. While relieved that progress had been made in the case, Beverly remains overwhelmed by unanswered questions. She wonders about the circumstances that led to Bridget's encounter with Spencer and whether it was a chance meeting or something more sinister. Despite the arrest, Beverly remains uncertain about whether it will bring any solace or closure to the family. Meanwhile, on June 3, 2018, in Sandy Springs, a suburb of Atlanta, friends and family of Bridget gathered to honor her memory and celebrate the impact she had on their lives during her brief time on Earth. The gathering served as a testament to Bridget's vibrant spirit and the profound connections she forged with those around her. In the midst of their grief, Bridget's family faces the practical challenges of arranging her funeral. To alleviate the financial burden, they've set up a GoFundMe account to help cover the costs associated with the funeral arrangements. This gesture of support from friends, family, and the community underscores the outpouring of love and solidarity that surrounds Bridget's family during their difficult times. As we come to the end of Bridget Shield's story, Bridget's memory will endure, kept alive by the love of her family and friends. The arrest brings a glimmer of hope for closure, but questions remain. How did it happen? Was it a chance encounter or something more sinister? Only time will tell. According to psychologists, most often teenagers commit offenses for 3 reasons: the desire to assert themselves and gain authority among their peers, alcohol addiction or addiction to illegal drugs, but most importantly, a sense of impunity. Even for the most serious crimes, minors often receive minimal punishment because their young age is taken into account. In our story today, a schoolgirl named Mackenzie Sharilla became the perpetrator of a terrible tragedy that took 2 lives at once. However, the girl herself did not feel remorse for her crime and at the trial stated that she could do almost anything while staying alive. But she does not consider herself cool. Mackenzie repeatedly changed her testimony, writing off everything on a lapse in memory and apparently, until the last moment was confident that she would get away with it. But the verdict of the judge literally dumbfounded the young criminal and her mother so desperately defending her daughter. But let's get to the bottom of this. Who is Mackenzie Sharilla? Mackenzie Sharilla was born in August 2004 in the quiet town of Strongsville, Ohio, and was the 3rd child in the family. Her parents, John Sharilla and Madeline Stevens, tried to bring up their heirs in love and care to give them a good education and encourage all endeavors. The youngest daughter was a family favorite. She was forgiven many pranks from childhood, and even serious misdemeanors often got away with it. Mackenzie grew up capricious, demanding, and selfish girl. She was used to the fact that parents always do as she requires and was also confident in her own impunity no matter what she did. Classmates and teachers of the girl noted that in childhood she was quite a nice and open child. But with age, her character and behavior began to deteriorate. The girl threw real tantrums. If something went wrong, she easily lost her temper, behaved impudently and impatiently, swore, and could even get into a fight. Mackenzie did not consider anyone's opinion but her own. Her words should always be the last, and she put her own interests above all else. In adolescence, the character of the girl became simply unbearable, but her parents did not see anything terrible in this, believing that her daughter has a transitional age and she should be treated with understanding and patience. However, bad character was far from the worst of all the troubles. In high school, Mackenzie was addicted to alcohol as well as sometimes dabbled in illegal drugs, but she got away with it. Often, the girl's actions were reckless and carried a direct threat not only to her, but also to the people around her. Parents still did not notice or simply did not want to notice the obvious problem. Like many of her peers, Mackenzie was a big fan of social media and literally never let her smartphone out of her hands. She often posted provocative pictures of herself smoking or drinking alcohol on her account, and she left equally provocative comments on them. Mackenzie's friends were just like her. Together, they vandalized, organized pogroms, fights, sometimes stole, and several times came to the attention of the police. However, the young people were treated only with warnings and educational talks, which strengthened their belief in their own impunity. Dominique Rousseau, a young man named Dominic Rousseau, was also a native of Strongsville. He was born in September 2001 and was the 4th of 7 children to his parents, Frank and Christine Rousseau. The boy was raised with 3 brothers and 3 sisters with whom he was always very close. Dominic studied well in school, from childhood years actively engaged in sports and tried to lead a healthy lifestyle. Despite the fact that he grew up in a large family, neither he himself nor any of his brothers or sisters was not deprived of parental love, attention, and care. Spouses Frank and Christine were moderately strict with their children, but at the same time promoted their all-round development. Dominic always had a lot of friends. He was used to being in the center of attention and became the soul of any company. The young man had a bright and quite attractive appearance, was trim and interesting, so he also had a lot of admirers from a young age. However, he himself tried to avoid fleeting romances, emphasizing serious and promising relationships. After graduating from high school, Rousseau became a student at a local university, choosing the specialization producer of performing arts. He dreamed of linking his life with music and one day becoming a famous music producer. In addition, the talented and versatile Dominic wrote and performed songs himself. By the age of 20, the guy already had his own small business. He bought a car and rented a separate apartment in a good neighborhood. At the same time, he continued to play sports and was considered one of the best students at the university. First love. Dominic and Mackenzie met for the first time when the girls studied in the graduating class. It happened at one of the parties in the company of mutual friends, and this accidental meeting became fatal for both of them. Young people were complete opposites of each other, and opposites are known to attract. A handsome, curly-haired young man, well-versed in music, immediately attracted Mackenzie's attention. He was radically different from the guys she usually socialized with. He was educated, well-mannered, interesting, and could easily hold a conversation on any topic. Mackenzie herself had a striking appearance and slim figure, dressed well, and knew how to make the right impression. She turned on all her charm to draw the attention of the guys she liked, and she managed to achieve the desired rather quickly. In the fall of 2021, the couple began dating, and almost immediately, each of them introduced the chosen one to their parents. But if Mackenzie's parents were delighted with her choice and considered Dominic a brilliant couple for their daughter, the parents of the guy had mixed feelings about his passport. On the one hand, the girl looked sweet, innocent, and tried to make a good impression on them. But on the other hand, something in her immediately alerted Frank and Christine Russo. Friends and family members of Cheryl were sure that Mackenzie, for the first time in her life, really fell in love and sincerely hoped that the relationship with the chosen one will positively affect her character and behavior. Then no one could not even guess what tragedy would end this youthful romance. The couple began to appear everywhere together holding hands and openly demonstrating their tender feelings for each other. So soon, the whole small town knew about the relationship. Those who knew Mackenzie well sincerely felt sorry for her boyfriend, but most just happy for them. What was wrong with her? Soon, Dominic began to notice oddities in his girlfriend's behavior, her defiant antics and desire to make everyone around her do only what she wants. At first, he did not focus too much attention on it, writing off everything on the young age and the desire to attract attention. The young people made plans for their future together and even planned to get married as soon as Mackenzie turned 18. They also planned to leave their native provincial town and together go to conquer a major metropolis, ideally, New York. There before, Dominic would open a lot of opportunities to build a brilliant career in the music industry and fully reveal his talent. But as time went on, Mackenzie's behavior became more and more alarming and sometimes even frightened the guy. She demanded from her boyfriend that he did only what she wanted. And if he did not agree with her in something, she made scandals, threw tantrums, and behaved like a little capricious child. At first, Dominic tried to translate everything into a joke, but soon realized that this is the true face of his chosen one. In public, she was still trying to hold on, but being alone with her boyfriend spewed on him the whole storm of his emotions and sometimes even pounced on him with fists. Mackenzie's behavior became more and more aggressive, and at some point, the young man decided that he had enough. He suggested that she take a pause in the relationship and sort out her feelings. But upon hearing this, Mackenzie had a public showdown in front of their mutual friends. She screamed, threatened Dominic that she would kill him if he left her, threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. But by doing so, she only made him feel more confident that he was doing the right thing by ending this toxic and unrewarding relationship. Obsessive stalking. Mackenzie had no intention of letting her boyfriend go, and at first, she acted as if nothing had happened. She continued to called him to various parties and other events, as well as exhibited in social networks of their joint photos, accompanying them with posts with declarations of love. When Dominic firmly told her that everything is over between them, she literally went mad with anger and rage. Mackenzie went to his house almost daily and shouted all sorts of nasty things, insults, and threats under his windows. She called him from different numbers, left messages on his answering machine, wrote on social media, and emailed him. Mackenzie then swore in love and offered to try to start all over again, then again began to insult and threats. Russo was confused. He simply did not know how to react to such behavior because he had never encountered such behavior. He tried talking, tried to ignore the former lover, and a couple of times even recorded her threatening tantrums on his phone. It got to the point that Sharilla, seeing the ex-boyfriend on the street or in another public place, began to scream and insult him in front of passers-by. She turned Dominic's life into a real nightmare, but he still hoped that a little more time would pass and she would leave him alone, switching to someone else. One day, in front of witnesses, Mackenzie declared that it was easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him go. Mackenzie said that if he didn't come back to her, no one would have him and she would take care of it. The young man did not take these words seriously, although those around him realized that Mackenzie was not joking. Among the most frequent threats from the mouth of the schoolgirl were promises to hit and run over the guy with a car, as well as to put him in the car and drive off a cliff or stop on the railroad in front of a train rushing at them. Each option sounded terrifying, and each of them Mackenzie described in detail as if she had planned it all out long ago and was just waiting for the right moment. An unexpected reconciliation. When Mackenzie realized that threats and insults would not help her to get Dominic back, but only distanced him, she decided to change her tactics. Mackenzie became sweet and charming again, stopped pressuring and harassing her ex-boyfriend, and instead tried her best to pretend that she realized her mistakes and wanted to change for the better. She talked about the upcoming enrollment, asked to help her choose a university, and also claimed that she had gotten smart, and most of all was now concerned about the final exams. Such changes pleasantly surprised Dominic. He, in spite of everything, still had tender feelings for the former girlfriend and decided out of kindness to help her with university enrollment. Therefore, they again began to see each other and communicate. Gradually, the couple became close again. Dominic began to invite Mackenzie on dates, sought to spend all his free time with her, and believed that she had changed, matured, became more serious and responsible. He did not notice how he fell in love with her again, and all the former offenses remained somewhere in the past. However, this time, the young people were in no hurry to announce to all friends and acquaintances about their reunion. Their meetings were more like secret dates where they just enjoyed each other's company, avoiding the close attention of others. When Dominic's own brother Angelo learned about what was happening, he suggested that nothing good would come of it. But the young man in love did not heed his words. A devious plan. While Dominic naively rejoiced at being reunited with his girlfriend and the changes he thought had happened to her, Mackenzie herself hatched a terrifying plan of reprisal against the young man. She was so fascinated by the idea of a car and a spectacular car crash that she began to work out the scenario in detail. In her free time, she spent hours driving around the city, choosing a place suitable for the realization of her plan. However, there were no high and steep cliffs nearby, and going out on the tracks while waiting for a train seemed to her an unreliable idea. One day, Sharilla drove into a nearby industrial area, a fairly secluded place with no cameras on the way and very few cars in the area. The schoolgirl's attention was drawn to a huge brick wall, and her second imagination immediately conjured up a new, no less horrible plan. She decided that if she accelerated to the maximum possible speed and crashed into the wall, it would be no less spectacular than falling off a cliff into an abyss. It should be noted that initially Mackenzie planned to die together with her lover so that their story was retold by all the inhabitants of the city. She even told her best friend about it, but her friend simply did not believe in the seriousness of her intentions because Mackenzie had visited such delusional ideas before, but everything was limited to empty conversations. A terrible realization of the plan and an accidental victim. At the July 2022, just a week before her coming of age, Mackenzie suggested to Dominic that they go to an upcoming party hosted by their mutual friends. It would be a good opportunity to have fun, to unwind, and to let everyone know that they were back together and loved each other dearly. The young man readily agreed. He still didn't feel threatened by Mackenzie and believed in the sincerity of her feelings and intentions. The event was scheduled for Saturday, July 30th. Dominic and Mackenzie appeared in the middle of the party, holding hands, which immediately attracted the attention of those present. They looked happy, smiled, and openly showed affectionate feelings for each other. Friends were sincerely pleased with their reunion and noted that they are a very beautiful and harmonious couple. All evening and all night, the young people had fun, willingly photographed and without shyness, kissed in front of everyone. But no one even guessed what a terrible tragedy would end this party. The couple drank a little, however, like everyone else at the event. But Mackenzie, secretly from everyone, took a dose of illegal drugs, so to speak, for courage, so as not to change his mind, and at the last moment did not hit the brakes. In the morning, Russo and Sharilla said goodbye to everyone and headed for the car. But then a friend of the guy, Davian Flanagan, followed them and asked them to give him a ride home. Mackenzie tried to object, saying they had plans of their own, but Dominic saw no problem with giving his friend a ride. Not wanting to fight, arouse suspicion, or change plans, Mackenzie agreed, signing Davian's death warrant. Despite her lover's objections, Mackenzie got behind the wheel of the car. Her boyfriend sat next to her in the passenger seat, and her friend sat behind him. The car started and slowly pulled away from the party venue, heading out on its most recent trip. On the main street, Mackenzie drove quietly, keeping to the speed limit and trying not to draw attention to herself. At a stoplight, she stopped though the road was empty. Mackenzie once again considered her plan while her passengers dozed off. She later claimed that she wanted to die in the accident, but the perpetrator was obviously lying because she had fastened her seatbelt during the last stop while her passengers remained unbuckled. When the light turned green, she drove off, quickly picking up speed, and then took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road leading into an industrial area. Obviously, the guys didn't immediately realize what was going on, if at all. It was as if the devil himself had possessed the driver. The car accelerated to top speed, but Mackenzie continued to press hard on the gas pedal, steering the car into a blank brick wall. A bystander and a miraculous rescue. There wasn't a soul in the industrial area early Sunday morning, so no one saw the accident or rushed to help. Only one woman who lived on the outskirts, not far from the scene of the accident, heard the bang and was not too lazy to go outside to see what was the matter. She saw smoke, and when she got closer, she realized that there had been a car crash, after which she ran back inside to call emergency services. Medics arrived at the scene about half an hour after the accident, but the two guys in the car could not be helped. They died on the spot. The girl behind the wheel was alive. She was saved by her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie was unconscious, and her legs were trapped in the mangled car. But she was breathing, and her pulse was clearly palpable, giving hope that she would survive. She opened her eyes several times during the process of being released from the car, but was obviously unaware of what was going on around her. Mackenzie was immediately sent to the hospital where she was diagnosed with a number of fractures and internal organ damage. Blood tests showed that she was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. However, according to the doctor, perhaps that is what prevented her from dying from painful shock while help was on the way. Investigation, leads, and confession. Initially, the police, having received the results of Mackenzie's tests, assumed that she, being under the influence of illegal substances, simply did not realize what she was doing and perhaps tried to drive through the wall, or did not see any obstacles in her way. In favor of this version was the lack of braking distance. It was not possible to talk to Sharilla herself because she was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation. However, she soon came to her senses and, realizing what she had done, began to sob and pour out her soul to the doctor on duty. She admitted that she purposely drove into the wall at a great speed because she wanted to kill her boyfriend and originally planned to die with him. Mackenzie also added that Davian was an accidental victim due to his own obsession because he asked to go with them. The doctor did not take the patient's rambling story seriously, deciding that it was a delusional state resulting from anesthesia and painkillers as well as guilt over the death of a loved one. And when the police were allowed to talk to the recovering Mackenzie, she suddenly changed her testimony completely. Now Mackenzie claimed that she remembered almost nothing about the events of that night because she took alcohol and illegal substances. According to the girl, she had a lapse in memory after she got behind the wheel. And how Davian was in the car, she has no idea. However, the facts were to the contrary. The surveillance cameras were able to track the first part of the route the car had taken, and the footage clearly showed that Mackenzie was driving slowly and according to the rules until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial zone. Moreover, it turned out that Mackenzie had driven the entire route both ways several days earlier, and her car had been seen there at various times by at least a dozen witnesses back to normal. After being discharged from the hospital, Mackenzie recovered quickly enough and tried to get back to her old carefree life. She had no remorse and was confident that she could get away with it. Mackenzie was once again active on social media, meeting with friends and making plans for the future. In September, she decided to go to a concert of her favorite band playing in a neighboring city. At that time, the bones of her legs had not yet fully fused, but this did not stop her, and she appeared on the concert stage in a wheelchair. At the same time, she wore bright makeup, dressed provocatively, took selfies with friends, and posted them on her account. In October, when Sharilla was on her feet, she went to a Halloween celebration dressed up in a pre-made costume. Mackenzie lived life to the fullest and even made new acquaintances. But on November 4th, 2022, she was taken into custody. Trial and sentencing. It took the investigation just over 3 months to gather the necessary evidence and proof to bring the case to trial. Mackenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession, and use of a controlled substance that was found in her pocket and detected in her blood. The defendant changed her testimony several times, first citing a lapse in memory, and then when her friend testified in court as a witness to whom she revealed her plan. Mackenzie changed tactics, saying that she wanted to die with her lover. But even here, there were immediately discovered inconsistencies because she had previously fastened herself with a seatbelt. On August 21, 2023, Sharilla was found guilty of all charges. However, an important nuance was taken into account. Namely, at the time of the crime, she was not yet 18 years old. It was 5 days before her majority, so she was tried as a minor. Under state law, she was entitled to at least 2 consecutive sentences of 15 years for each murder without parole. But because of her young age, she was allowed to serve the 2 sentences concurrently, meaning she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By then, Mackenzie would be 33 years old. Both sides were unhappy with the court's decision. Family members of the deceased young people said they would seek a review of the case in order to increase the punishment, and parents and Mackenzie's lawyer, on the contrary, considered the sentence too harsh and filed an appeal. However, the judge left the sentence unchanged, noting that he did not believe that Sharilla would leave prison after 15 years. The defendant herself, in his opinion, did not repent for the evil she had committed, behaved arrogantly and even insolently towards the court. But now she will have enough time to seriously consider her heinous act. Janice Pietropoula and Lynn Seathaler, 2 young best friends aged 19, were scheduled to return to their hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on June 30, 1973. However, when they failed to emerge from their rented cottage at Farrar's Motel by noon that Saturday, the hotel staff assumed they were simply sleeping in. The manager of the day shift decided to investigate and knocked on their door. Despite repeated attempts, there was no response. He made the decision to enter the room using a spare key. What he found inside left him in a state of shock. A gruesome crime scene where both girls had been brutally murdered. The community of Virginia Beach was left in turmoil by this tragic event. Little did the investigators know at the time that it would take 50 years for this case to be solved. Was this a random act of violence? Or were Janice and Lynn targeted by a serial killer? Virginia Beach, located in the state of Virginia, stands as an independent city. The current year of 2024 has seen the population soar to an impressive 463,000 residents. Despite this large number, crime rates in Virginia Beach have taken a significant dip. Shockingly, only 1 individual out of every 894 people falls victim to crime, making Virginia Beach a remarkable 29% safer than other regions in the United States. This city allures tourists throughout the year with its lively beach town ambience and thriving entertainment options. Those seeking an escape from the monotony of everyday life can find solace in this idyllic paradise, embracing the relaxed lifestyle often associated with coastal towns. Plethora of family-friendly attractions await, from kayaking and fishing to hiking adventures. For those who prefer lounging on the beach, Virginia Beach also captivates food enthusiasts with its diverse array of restaurants serving delectable cuisines. However, in the year 1973, Virginia Beach was shaken by a perplexing double homicide that left local authorities baffled: the tragic murders of Janice Pietropoula and Lynn Seathaler. Janice Pietropoula, born to Michael and Lucille Pietropoula on March 11, 1954, grew up with her 3 siblings in Verona, Pittsburgh. Known for her gentle nature and ambitious spirit, Janice cherished her Volkswagen Beetle, a prized possession she acquired through part-time work during high school. After graduating from Penn Hills High School in 1972, she worked as an editorial assistant for a financial magazine, saving up for her college education. During her high school years, she formed a close bond with Lynn Seathaler, who coincidentally shared her birth date of March 11, 1954. Raised by Paul and Phyllis Seathaler in Penn Hills, Pittsburgh, Lynn was described as friendly, outgoing, and possessing a gentle demeanor. The 2 individuals graduated from Penn Hills High School in 1972 and commenced their careers as secretaries for the Urban Redevelopment Authority. Lynn, like her companion Janice, opted to work first before saving up for college. Despite this, both of them desired to savor their newfound adult lives by embarking on an adventure prior to fully immersing themselves in work and studies. In the summer of 1973, Janice, Lynn, and a few of their high school acquaintances decided to journey to Virginia Beach for a well-deserved break. Ultimately, Janice and Lynn embarked on the trip alone as their friends withdrew due to other obligations. On June 24, 1973, they packed their belongings and flew from Pittsburgh to Virginia Beach. Over the next 5 days, both Janice and Lynn relished their time relaxing on the beach and exploring the attractions of Virginia Beach's oceanfront. During the evenings, they frequented local bars and restaurants with the friends they had made during the day. On multiple occasions, the motel staff observed the girls returning with male companions. Their comings and goings were not questioned as they were two young women on vacation enjoying themselves. However, the conclusion of their holiday was swiftly approaching. On June 30, 1973, both Janice and Lynn were scheduled to leave Virginia Beach and head back to Pittsburgh. When the day manager went to remind them of the checkout time, he had no idea he would be met with a gruesome scene. In the living room, he found the door jammed. Upon finally pushing it open, he was horrified to discover Janice's partially clothed body obstructing the doorway. It was evident that she had been murdered, given the significant amount of blood around her head and upper body. He called out for Lynn, who was in the adjacent room. Upon entering the second bedroom, he found Lynn had also been killed and left on the floor. Without delay, he rushed out to alert the authorities. The girls' highly anticipated holiday had concluded in tragedy. Upon the arrival of law enforcement, mere minutes after the distress call, they were met with a scene that could only be described as utterly chilling. The lifeless bodies of both girls lay on the floor, resembling discarded rag dolls. The room itself bore witness to a violent struggle, with Janice and Lynn's belongings scattered haphazardly. Their bodies, battered and bloodied, had met their tragic end with gunshot wounds to their heads. The bodies were swiftly taken for autopsy to ascertain the exact cause of death. As investigators delved deeper, a window screen discovered outside the cottage hinted at the killer's point of entry. The question lingered. Had the killer been lying in wait within the room, or had they slipped in while the girls slept? The motive behind the attack remained shrouded in mystery. Was it a random act of violence, or a meticulously planned crime? Dusting for fingerprints and collecting potential forensic evidence, investigators noted that the crime scene bore the hallmarks of a staged robbery. Oddly, nothing of value had been taken from the room, leading them to rule out robbery as a motive. The discovery of 3 fake identity cards hinted at a possible link to alcohol purchases. The third card, belonging to an unidentified girl, added another layer of intrigue. Bullets found at the scene were too damaged to determine the gun's caliber, but it was speculated to be a smaller caliber, possibly a pistol. The autopsy unveiled even more gruesome details. The girls had been murdered hours before their discovery in the early hours of Saturday morning. Janice had endured a harrowing ordeal of strangulation, assault, and multiple gunshot wounds to the face. Lynn was not assaulted, but she endured being strangled, beaten, and a 4-inch slash across her neck before being shot twice in the face. A shattered wine glass was found in the room, stained with Lynn's blood. Forensic evidence was meticulously collected from the girls' fingernails and skin, securely stored for further analysis. Case left investigators puzzled with more questions than answers. Who would target 2 young girls on vacation, and what could be the motive? Under the leadership of William Hayden, a distinguished captain at the Virginia Beach Police Department, the investigation commenced. Motel staff were interviewed about the events leading up to the tragedy. The night manager recalled seeing the girls returning between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. appearing cheerful and unaccompanied. Further inquiries revealed that the girls had befriended several men during their stay and invited them to their rooms. Half of the police force in Virginia Beach was assigned the task of hunting down the person or persons responsible for the girls' death. They combed through rooftops, manholes, beach hangouts, and local bars in search of any suspicious individuals. A helicopter team was even called in to provide aerial surveillance. But unfortunately, their efforts did not bring them any closer to solving the case. Meanwhile, another team focused on interviewing multiple men who were acquainted with the girls during their stay at the motel. Each man provided solid alibis and willingly submitted to DNA testing. Despite a week of relentless detective work, the leads they followed ended in dead ends, and the hundreds of interviews conducted yielded no new information. Captain Richard C. Davis, head of the detective division in Virginia Beach, stated that several suspects had been ruled out, leaving them with no viable leads to pursue. As the investigation continued, the families of Janice and Lynn laid the girls to rest in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on July 5, 1973. With a lack of progress, the case hit a standstill as the years went by. Advancements in DNA technology were still in progress, and investigators tested any forensic evidence they had collected. Unfortunately, the results were inconclusive. However, they did discover that the murder weapon used was a .22 caliber pistol. A glimmer of hope emerged a decade later when Captain Hayden followed up on a lead that took him to Los Angeles in 1983 to investigate 2 potential suspects. Ultimately, it was revealed that these men were not involved in the murders. Investigators also explored the theory of a possible serial killer in the Virginia Beach area targeting Janice and Lynn. The sole connection that the investigators had to the ongoing case were the victims, who were of similar age to both Janice and Lynn. There were a total of 11 young, attractive, and Caucasian girls who had been tragically murdered. Despite the lack of distinguishing factors in the cases, this remained the most promising lead. The investigators were hopeful that by identifying the suspected serial killer, they would finally uncover the truth behind Janice and Lynn's murder. However, by 1988, the investigation had hit a standstill. The dossier at the Virginia Beach Police Department contained a staggering 1,300 pages of notes and investigation files. Yet the case had gone cold over the years. Despite diligent efforts to follow up on leads and retest forensic evidence, the investigation yielded no results and the file was once again put away. It wasn't until 2018 that the cold case finally saw a breakthrough. With advancements in DNA research, the investigators decided to utilize the new technology. After testing the forensic evidence recovered from Janice and Lynn's autopsies and uploading the DNA profile into the national database, they received a positive match. The Virginia Police Department sought assistance from various law enforcement agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Naval Crime Investigation Service, and New York Police Department. Through their collaborative efforts, they were able to trace the DNA to a man who had lived in New York but had ties to Norfolk, Virginia in the 1970s. This man, Ernest Broadnax, was a military veteran. On April 8, 2019, authorities took into custody 81-year-old Ernest Broadnax. Nearly 5 decades had passed since the tragic murders of 2 teenagers, and now law enforcement claims to have finally apprehended the individual responsible. Ernest Broadnax, now 80 years old, was arrested by the New York City police in connection to the cold case homicides. Allegedly, he is the one who took the lives of the 2 young girls who were residing in a beach house in Virginia Beach. Back in 1973, Ernest had been residing in an affordable housing community for veterans in Queens, New York. When the police arrived to detain him, Ernest reportedly nodded in acknowledgement and cooperated as they escorted him to the awaiting police vehicle. His neighbors described him as a friendly and helpful individual who preferred solitude. They were taken aback upon learning about his dark past. Not much information has been disclosed about Ernest's early years. Records indicate that he was born in 1938 and lived in Norfolk, Virginia. He had been married and divorced and had served in the military. Following an assault charge in the late 1960s, he was incarcerated. It remains unclear whether he left the military prior to his arrest or received a dishonorable discharge. In the 1970s, he was released and remarried. The relationship ended due to his abusive behavior. Investigators suspect that shortly after his second divorce, Ernest committed the murders of Janice and Lynn. The motive behind the escalation of his criminal activities remains unknown. His whereabouts following the crimes were uncertain, but his extensive criminal record paints a different picture. With 14 prior arrests dating back to the 1990s, he was imprisoned in 2001 on 3 separate occasions for burglary and assault offenses. In 2013, he was released and has since maintained a low profile, residing at the Veterans Housing in Queens, New York. According to a neighbor, Ernest once alluded to being involved in a serious crime that harmed someone, but he did not provide details. He also confessed to fellow residents in the apartment building that he had struggled with drug and alcohol addiction in the past but had successfully recovered after undergoing rehabilitation. Following the apprehension of Ernest Broadnax, Virginia Beach Police Chief Jim Cervera briefed the media on the arrest process. Janice's brother, Michael Jr. Pietropola, shared the family's ordeal and expressed gratitude for the apprehension of a suspect. Lynn's friend, Valerie DeVere, informed reporters that initially the police suspected her of knowing the suspect. She was relieved to discover that she was not acquainted with him and was grateful to witness justice being served for her friend's murder. Janice's younger sister, Judy, recalled the day she learned of her sister's tragic death. Judy and her elder sister, Michelle, conveyed how Janice's murder had shattered their family and altered their lives forever. "Part of us all perished," remarked Michelle. For Police Captain William Hayden, who led the initial investigation, the case held personal significance for reasons he could not articulate. Ernest Broadnax remained in custody at a detention facility in Queens, New York, following his arrest. During his detention, investigators uncovered additional incriminating evidence from his residence. The specifics of the findings were not disclosed to the media or the public, as the case had not yet gone to trial. Investigators also needed to corroborate their DNA evidence and obtained a sample from Ernest. They also verified the viability of Janice's DNA sample for forensic analysis by collecting samples from her 3 siblings, which unequivocally matched hers, confirming that the original DNA sample remained intact and admissible as evidence in court. In August 2019, while awaiting a trial date, Ernest Broadnax was ordered by a judge to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. The evaluation revealed that he was suffering from dementia, making him unfit to stand trial due to his impaired memory, thinking, and social skills. Subsequently, the Attorney General's office filed a civil charge against Ernest, seeking to classify him as a violent predator likely to reoffend. This move would enable prosecutors to have him committed indefinitely to a psychiatric facility, even without facing a trial in the criminal case. Ernest was held at the Eastern State Hospital in Williamsburg, New York, where he was required to stay and receive treatment as the prosecution built their case. During his time at the facility, he underwent several assessments, sometimes being deemed competent and other times showing signs of severe dementia. Trial date was postponed until 2021 due to the pandemic. In late 2021, a court hearing was conducted to decide whether Ernest would proceed to trial. A Virginia Circuit Court judge determined that there was probable cause to proceed with the trial to assess whether Ernest was likely to engage in violent behavior at his advanced age. This decision followed testimonies from Virginia Beach cold case detective Christy Curtis, clinical psychologist Michelle Schollander, and arguments from Ernest's attorney. Curtis recounted details from her interview with Ernest where he mentioned working at Dick's restaurant on the oceanfront in Virginia Beach in the early 1970s and recalled Janice and Lynn as peep show girls. Dr. Schollander, who had evaluated Ernest's mental health and criminal history, testified that he posed a high risk of reoffending, exhibiting antisocial personality traits and acting in his own interests. Ernest's lawyer advocated for him to be given a chance. The attorney highlighted that his client had refrained from criminal activities since being released in 2013 and had exhibited positive behavior. Nevertheless, the trial would not proceed. In October 2022, Ernest Broadnax passed away at the age of 84 after facing various health issues at the Eastern State Hospital. Following the news of Ernest Broadnax's passing, Michael Pietropoulos issued a written statement to the media. He conveyed his dissatisfaction with the case's outcome but mentioned that they found solace in the belief that Ernest would be judged in death. The spokesperson for the Virginia Beach Commonwealth Attorney's Office responded to Michael's statement, sharing a similar sense of disappointment and frustration. She recognized that cases like this offer a glimpse into the minds of killers and can unsettle even the most resilient individuals. 40 years ago, an American teenager was found bludgeoned to death in a cemetery in New Jersey. Her face was so badly injured that it was impossible to identify her at the time. The American public began to refer to her as Princess Doe, the Jane Doe who had died too young. For 4 decades, her real name has been a mystery until now. Hi and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today's episode, I'm going to take you guys through the story of how Princess Doe was killed, how her identity was revealed, and how her killer was finally caught. Let's get right into it. Princess Doe was a previously unidentified American teenager from West Babylon, New York. She was found murdered in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey on July 15, 1982. Her face had been bludgeoned beyond recognition. Her case gained national attention, and the public took a special interest in unraveling her story and finding answers. Thursday, July 15, 1982 at around 8 a.m., gravedigger George Keyes discovered the body of a young girl in the rear section of the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. The body was found lying on its back just over a steep bank that leads to a creek below. The victim's face had been beaten beyond recognition with a yet-to-be-determined object. Due to the significant decomposition of her body, even her eye color could not be confirmed. The young girl was dressed in a red short-sleeve shirt. A peasant-style skirt was found lying on top of the victim's legs. No footwear or undergarments were found. No conclusive evidence was found, but this was difficult to determine because of how much the body was decayed. A golden cross necklace was found tangled in the victim's hair. 2 earrings were found in her left ear. Red nail polish was found on the right hand only, and she had no surgical scars, distinct birthmarks, or tattoos. Scars or marks on the head or face area could not be known due to the condition of the body. Forensic anthropologists determined that the victim was not pregnant and had never given birth, and was most likely between the ages of 18 and 14 years old at the time of her death. Toxicology did not reveal any traces of drugs, but was not entirely conclusive because of the time elapsed between the death and the discovery of the body. It is believed that the body was discovered after 2 to 3 days or possibly even weeks of exposure to the elements. This was especially difficult to determine because of the hot and humid weather in the area at that time. The forensic examination indicated that the girl had attempted to fight back or defend herself from her attacker, as injuries indicating trauma to her hands and arms were visible. The girl's body was buried in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery, not far from where she was discovered in January 1983. Donated funds were used to pay for the victim's coffin and headstone. The headstone was engraved with the text, "Princess Doe, missing from home, dead among strangers, remembered by all." For many years, Princess Doe was thought to be Diane Janiskai, a missing teenager from San Jose, California who vanished on July 30th, 1979. This theory was propagated by several law enforcement officials in the state of New Jersey, who went as far as to hold a press conference identifying Diane Dye as Princess Doe. However, Lieutenant Eric Krantz, the Princess Doe case's original lead investigator, maintained that Diane Dye was not a viable candidate for Princess Doe's identity. Krantz's feelings were shared by Diane's family and investigators in California, who were particularly angered by the conduct of the New Jersey law enforcement. In February 2003, Princess Doe's DNA was compared with a DNA sample from Diane's mother, Patricia, and it was conclusively determined that Princess Doe was not Diane Dye. After seeing images of the girl's clothing in the newspaper, a witness named Anne-Marie Latimer reported to officials that she remembered seeing a girl wearing the same clothing as Princess Doe purchasing cigarettes on July 13, 1982, just 2 days before her body was found. Latimer stated that she was shopping with her daughter at a supermarket across from the cemetery and observed and was able to describe the victim's clothing. The shirt and skirt themselves were traced to a manufacturer in the Midwestern United States, although the brand labels were missing. 3 people reported after viewing the photos that they had bought similar clothes at a Long Island store, which is now closed. On September 22, 1999, the body of Princess Doe was exhumed from the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown so that DNA samples could be taken. The body was reburied in the same location. After a 2012 photo composite of the victim was released, it generated new tips as it resembled several missing girls from across the country. One theory was submitted that Princess Stone may have been a runaway and could have been an individual using false names while employed at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. In February 2012, a sample of her hair and a tooth were examined through isotope analysis and indicated that the victim was most likely born in the United States, at least 7 to 10 months in the Midwestern or Northeastern United States. The tooth sample indicated she could be from Arizona. It is also believed that the girl had spent a long time in Long Island, New York. Lieutenant Krams, now retired, toying the name Princess Doe early in the investigations and also managed to get the case covered extensively in the media. The case was used as the impetus for recording unidentified crime victims in the MCIC database at the national level. Princess Doe became the first such case entered by the FBI director. After extensive print media coverage in 1982, Lieutenant Krams, who was the original lead investigator from the Blairstown Police Department, was contacted by HBO regarding the Princess Doe case and asked if the channel could chronicle the case in an upcoming documentary entitled Missing. Krantz agreed, and the segment was filmed over several weeks. Krantz was shown following leads as they came in. The documentary featured actual footage of the recovery of Princess Doe's body, along with footage shot by HBO of Princess Doe's 1983 funeral. The case was also featured on America's Most Wanted in February 2012 in hopes of generating new information about the case. The same year, the most recent reconstruction was broadcast on CNN. On July 15, 2012, a memorial service was held for the 30th anniversary of Princess Doe being discovered at the top of the ravine where her remains were found. Over 100 citizens attended, as well as several reporters and cameras. The victim's clothing as well as her photo reconstructions were on display for public viewing. On October 12, 2014, Princess Doe was honored at a missing persons rally in the area. In the years between the first discovery in the body and the final identification, several theories cropped up. The first one was that Princess Doe was actually Diane Dye, a young girl missing from California, which has now been definitively disproved. Secondly, the killer of Princess Doe was already imprisoned for another homicide. A man called John Rees was briefly suspected as he was convicted of killing another woman in nearby Belvedere, New Jersey, but there was no real evidence of a connection with Princess Doe. The third theory was that Princess Doe was either a runaway that was known to work in the Ocean City, Maryland area, or a prostitute who worked at the local truck stop. The information for these two possibilities was highly inconclusive. Nobody from the local area came forward to identify Princess Doe on or off the record. It seems unlikely that not one single person would come forward if she was known in the area. The fourth and disturbing theory was that Princess Doe was killed by a Blairstown police officer, and that is why the case was never solved. But this claim is completely unsubstantiated. There are retired local law enforcement officers who still follow and contribute to the case even after 40 years. The fifth theory was that Princess Doe was a victim of a serial killer known to operate in the area, such as John Cleiss, Henry Lee Lucas, or Joel Rifkin. Though local law enforcement was aware of these claims, none were found to be credible. A sixth theory was that Princess Doe was an out-of-state teenager who worked at an area camp. Again, this was never proven. And now we come to the seventh theory, that Princess Doe was killed by a man named Arthur Kinlaw. For many years, this was the most current theory. Many of the facts fit the case, and this theory was explored on the America's Most Wanted website. Several New York Newsday articles referenced this theory that was published in 1999 and February. Mr. Kinlaw was already imprisoned for other crimes. But since Princess Doe's body wasn't identified, his involvement in her murder could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Princess Doe's body was re-exhumed in November 2020 using a grant, and she underwent DNA extraction for genetic genealogy. In May 2021, investigators were notified by the NCMEC, or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who were collaborating with Astria Forensics about obtaining DNA markers from degraded samples of Princess Doe's body using a grant. On June 18, 2021, investigators received the news that Astria Forensics agreed to extract DNA and construct a DNA profile. On February 10, 2022, Astria Forensics relayed to investigators that the creation of a DNA data file was successful. The results were sent to the NCMEC's consulting genealogist from Innovative Forensics Investigations. The managing officer was Jennifer Moore, who agreed to perform unlimited genealogy testing free of charge. On February 22, 2022, Innovative Forensics announced to investigators that they had found a candidate for Princess Doe. Investigators went to West Battle on New York, where they met Robert Olenek Jr., Princess Doe's brother. They also collected a DNA sample from Princess Doe's sister, which mitotyping technology used to build a mitochondrial DNA profile. The Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory assisted by creating an STR-DNA profile through the victim's sister's DNA sample. Mitotyping technology sent their results to the Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory, then sent both the mitochondrial DNA and STR-DNA profiles through the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. On April 29, 2022, the center identified Princess Doe as Dawn Olenek. Her identity was formally announced on July 15, 2022, the 40th anniversary of her discovery. Robert Olenek Jr. said that Olenek left their home at her mother's request, and she was never seen or heard from again. Way back in 1999, evidence came to light that Arthur and Donna Kinlaw may have been involved in Princess Doe's murder. Donna was arrested in California for attempting to commit welfare fraud by using the name Eliana, which was traced to a Long Island native. When the police questioned her, she gave them details about the murder of Linda, and her testimony put the Kinlaws behind bars. Donna gave details about 2 murders Arthur had committed of 2 other female victims who remain unidentified today. After Arthur was faced with a death sentence, Donna told authorities that Kinlaw had killed another woman, a sex worker, earlier in 1982. She told police that she was with Arthur in the cemetery and witnessed him commit the murder. Another report states that Donna Kinlaw said that in July 1982, her husband brought home a teenage girl, left home, and returned without her. He later apparently disposed of his clothing and cleaned his vehicle. Afterward, he threatened his wife, claiming if she did not attend her job, he would take her life as he did to the girl he brought home. However, a lack of cooperation meant that Arthur Kinlaw was not charged. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, who worked on the case as a member of the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, from which he is now retired, stated that Kinlaw claimed responsibility for her death, but I have no physical evidence to confirm that. And without the identity of Princess Doe, I have no way of connecting the dots, so to speak, putting her in a place where he could have been or would have been at the same time. Spears also reported that he doubted the confession because the Kinlaws could not provide a name for Princess Doe. even though they claimed to have been with her for some time. Even though he questioned the credibility of their statements, Spears does not believe the victim was native to Long Island, New York. However, Donna Kinlaw was interviewed by a forensic artist who created a sketch of the girl she claimed to have met, which does resemble the most recent composite. Arthur Kinlaw remained incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder. Following the 2022 investigation of Princess Doe as Dawn Alignac, Arthur Kinlaw was reconsidered as a suspect and later charged with Alignac's murder. Dawn Alignac was born on August 5, 1964. She had been a junior at Connequot High School in Bohemia, New York, where she had lived with her mother and sister, authorities said, but she soon moved out of the family home. According to her brother, she was thrown out of her home by her mom. She ended up getting killed in a cemetery, leaving no clue as to her real identity. But for more than 20 years, the name of her suspected killer was no secret. In 1999, the wife of Arthur Kinlaw, the convicted pimp who today is serving time for the murder of many other Long Island women, tied her husband not only to those deaths, but to the brutal slaying of the girl in the Blairstown Cemetery. In an interview with Newsday at the time, Donna Kinlaw recounted how her husband in the summer of 1982 brought a girl of about 18 years old back to their central Islay home. She told the newspaper as well as police that her husband left with the woman, but later returned home alone, appearing shaken. About 2 weeks later, according to Newsday, she read that police in Belvedere, New Jersey had found the body of a dead girl who fit the description of the girl who was in their house that night. He kept saying, "What does it say? What does it say? Does it say who the person was who got killed?" She said her husband asked. From the story she read aloud to her husband, Donna Kinlaw told Newsday that she remembered that the New Jersey police named the dead girl Princess Jane Doe. Not long afterward, investigators exhumed her body to recover the murder victim's femur bone in hopes of using her DNA to identify her. And in fact, investigators acknowledged that Arthur Kinlaw confessed to the New Jersey murder in written statements dating back to February 2005. But it was not until April of this year that Dawn Alignac was positively identified. Arthur Kinlaw, now 68, is currently imprisoned in Sullivan County, New York on 2 other first-degree murder convictions from February. Among them was a teenager he knew only as Linda in April 1984 in the Bronx, Newsday reported. "I strangled her with my hand," said Kinlaw. "She was hit about the head by me with a bat." Arthur Kinlaw has now been charged with 1 count of homicide as the result of the subsequent investigation, witness statements, and his confession of Alignac's murder. It is believed that after Dawn Alignac refused his demands to go into prostitution, he drove her to New Jersey. They both ended up in Blairstown, where Kinlaw murdered her in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Neither Alignac nor Kinlaw had a connection with the town. Kinlaw remains imprisoned at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Investigators are now looking to piece together Dawn Alignac's movements in the time leading up to her death. The DNA Doe Project, also DNA Doe Project Incorporated or DDP, is an American nonprofit volunteer organization formed to identify unidentified deceased persons, more commonly known as John or Jane Doe, by using forensic genealogy. Their volunteers identified victims of automobile accidents, homicides, and unusual circumstances, such as persons who committed suicide under an alias. The group was founded in February 2017 by Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press. Unraveling the mystery of Princess Doe has been a sensational success for genealogical DNA testing of exactly this kind. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact. And for the case of Princess Doe, that was exactly what happened. A molar root weighing just 200 kilograms would hold the answers that had eluded investigators for close to 40 years. With the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Princess Doe's Mueller and eyelash were submitted to Astria Forensics in 2021 for possible DNA extraction. What is so special about Astria is that they can extract DNA from samples that are degraded or otherwise would provide no value, said Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC. "We knew that if anyone could get the information that was needed, Astria could, and they did." Kelly Kincaid, CEO of Astria Forensics, told NCMEC that they were lucky to find that the DNA was exceptionally well preserved and allowed for millions of pieces of information to be gathered to complete the DNA profile. This single DNA extract contained hundreds of millions of unique human DNA fragments, said Kelly. "With these sequencing data, we were able to reconstruct her whole genome single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNP profile. This resulted in Astria being able to deliver genotype files to NCMEC and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office that could go on and be used to complete Princess Doe's genealogy. This technology that would not have been possible 40 years ago was just the break the investigators had been hoping for to identify Princess Do's identity. Once Astria finished the sequencing, Innovative Forensic Investigations, or IFI, started to work on investigative genetic genealogy techniques to build a family tree that would ultimately lead to the true identity of Princess Do, or who we now know as Dawn Alagnac. This work was only possible because of the collaborative effort of each agency, said Jennifer Moore, CEO of IFI. Our team brings forward a diverse set of skills that allows us to help find answers to cases. Echoing Moore's sentiment in today's press conference, Prosecutor Pfeiffer reiterated that science and technology made the impossible possible in this case. Dawn's case was deeply personal for the investigators involved, and their push for answers and justice never wavered. Dawn's family expressed deep gratitude to everyone who worked to find answers in Dawn's case. "This is a very big deal for my family," said Dawn's cousin. "I'd like to thank Blair staff for treating my cousin like she was one of their own. Touches our family deeply. My cousin is always in my heart," he said while tapping the photo of Dawn pinned to his chest. Blairstown. David Taruona gave up. "We were greatly appreciative of that." Since Princess Do was the first unidentified persons case to be entered into NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, by the director of the FBI, William Webster, on June 30, 1983. This was a historic moment for missing and unidentified persons that has continued to play a crucial role in investigations since. The entry in NCIC has remained current and alive until today, when she will be removed. The tenacity of law enforcement has never stopped, and they continue to pour resources and new technology into solving this case. And it's thanks to the collaboration between police authorities and genealogical DNA testing experts that Princess Do was publicly identified on the 40th anniversary of the discovery of her body as Dawn Alagnac. So what do you guys think about this 40-year-old case finally getting resolved? Do you still have any theories about Princess Do? Let us know in the comments section. Patricia Atkins, or Patty, was last seen leaving work at the Honda of America automotive plant in Marysville, Ohio, where she worked as a supervisor. She clocked out 19 seconds after midnight on June 29, 2001. The plant was set to close for a week because of the upcoming 4th of July holiday. After leaving work that night, she was never heard from again. Patty was a 29-year-old, divorced mother of a 7-year-old daughter, McKaylee, at the time of her disappearance. Patty had been having an affair with a married coworker at the time she went missing. She told her family and friends about the relationship and said he planned to leave his wife to be with her. Despite concerns from her family, Patty reassured them that they had an incredible connection. However, to an outsider, the following details would make the relationship seem very fishy. She had given him approximately $90,000 over at least a 1 to 2 year period, depleting her savings accounts, borrowing against her 401k retirement fund, getting cash advances from her credit cards, and taking out a second mortgage. The money was supposed to be used so that he could buy out his share of his and his wife's jointly owned side business when he divorced her to be with Patty. Patty had told her older sister, Marcia, that he promised to start repaying the money in July after she disappeared. Law enforcement was unable to link any money from Patty to him. It appears that Patty may have given him cash, and he never deposited any of it. Just before her disappearance, Patty told her friends and family she was going on a vacation to Canada in a remote location with him. She put her cats in a kennel and asked her sister to look after her daughter while she was gone. She said he told her they were going to a cabin in a remote area without phones, so she wouldn't be able to call her family. Strangely, he also told her not to pack anything because they would buy whatever she needed once they arrived. Despite his instructions not to take anything, Patty had packed a small, teal-colored duffel bag. She told her friend she had bought blue lingerie at Victoria's Secret. The bag and its contents have never been found. Patty asked a friend to drive her to work the night she disappeared so she could leave to start their vacation. She told her friend that he had to give a coworker a ride home and had told her to hide in the bed of his pickup truck under a truck bed cover until he dropped the other man off. When over a week had gone by and Patty had not returned for her daughter, her sister began calling Patty's home repeatedly, desperate to get in touch with her, but continued to get no answer. She then called his home and his wife answered. She pretended to be a customer and was told that he was not there but was expected back later. A few hours later, Marcia called his home again and was able to speak to him. Apparently, he got very quiet and acted strangely, stating he didn't know what she was talking about and acted as if he barely knew Patty as a coworker. Her family then went to Patty's home and, strangely, found in her closet paper money bands but without any money in them. These money bands were most likely from the money she had been giving him. Marcia then called the boyfriend's wife and told her about the affair and the money that Patty had been giving him. She talked to Marcia, then reported Patty missing on July 8, 2001. Detectives searched the boyfriend's home and his business. His wife told detectives that she didn't believe it was possible for her husband to have been having an affair. While searching the home, detectives found a birthday card from Patty to the boyfriend and a Hard Rock Cafe shirt from Florida that Patty had given him. They also found a letter written by Patty to the boyfriend. When the boyfriend was questioned, he said he and Patty had no plans to go on vacation together. He had never had an affair with her, and he only knew her slightly. He and his coworkers said they left the plant together at midnight, drove 30 miles in the direction of their hometown of Canton, Ohio, stopped at a Burger King restaurant, waited 45 minutes in the drive-thru line, got their food, and got home at 2:30 a.m. The boyfriend's wife backed up their story, saying her husband had, in fact, arrived home at 2:30 a.m., the usual time, and that she didn't know anything about an affair. The Burger King manager, however, said they were never busy in the early hours of the morning, and no one would have had to wait more than 10 to 15 minutes in the drive-thru to get their food. The equipment for the bed cover used the night Patty went missing was found on the truck, but the actual cover was found in a storage loft on his property. Police took the truck cover for analysis and found cat hairs on it and a small spot of blood. Patty's veterinarian determined the hair came from her cats, which she had brought to the kennel prior to her shift that day. Law enforcement decided at the time to wait on technological advancements to test the blood because it was such a small amount and they may not get more than one chance to test it. As of today, law enforcement has not released any new information on whether the blood has been tested. The police also searched a newly concreted area on his property that was alerted to by a cadaver dog but found nothing. He had placed the order for the cover just a few days before Patty's disappearance and had picked it up the same day she disappeared. A week later, he took it off and put it in storage. The truck was usually used as a work truck, and a coworker stated that it would not need a cover because the bed needs to be open to haul equipment. The boyfriend said he used it to cover some fishing gear in his truck bed. It is reported that he normally didn't drive the truck much, but he drove it to work the night Patty disappeared. The boyfriend took a polygraph test about the case and it showed deception. Shortly after Patty disappeared, he quit his job at the Honda plant and never returned to work there. He remains a person of interest but is not officially named a suspect. Therefore, his name is not mentioned in this video. The case has been difficult to solve without a body and without a murder weapon. Patty was declared legally dead in February 2006. Both authorities and her family believe she was the victim of homicide, and as of today, her case remains unsolved. Maria Balin Bernal was born on March 14, 1988, in Quito, Ecuador. Maria studied law at the Central University, where she graduated as a lawyer. She later obtained a specialization and a master's in criminal law from the Andean University Simon Bolivar, and also held a master's in oral litigation from the California Western School of Law. She was pursuing another master's degree in criminal procedural law at an Ecuadorian university. Additionally, she worked for Defensa Penal Group, part of a team of 6 women primarily handling criminal cases. In 2017, Maria married Lieutenant Herman Casares, a police officer. They met after he helped rescue her and her family during a robbery. Following this traumatic event, they continued to communicate and eventually fell in love, moving together to southern Quito. Despite having a child from a previous relationship and being a dedicated mother, Maria successfully balanced her time between her family and career. She became a respected litigator, especially known for her extensive knowledge of criminal procedures. One of her most prominent cases was representing the family of Alejandro Palas, who died in March 2021 after being hit by a patrol car from the Metropolitan Transit Agency of Quito. Maria demonstrated the agent's responsibility in the incident, attributing it to an intensive maneuver that prevented Palas from avoiding the accident. She also handled cases of sexual assault, gender violence, police defense, and alimony, aware that her role as a criminal lawyer had earned her enemies. In mid-2022, she named 2 individuals on TikTok, holding them responsible if anything were to happen to her. On the morning of Sunday, September 11th, Maria entered the General Alberto Enriquez Gallo Police School in north of Quito to bring a hamburger to her husband, Lieutenant Casares, who was on duty inside the school. That night, there was a party at the police facility, attended by officers and cadets, unknown to Maria. Upon entering the police school to find her husband, she was surprised to discover him in his room with Cadet Jocelyn Sanchez, who immediately left the scene. The timeline of the events of September 11th is still unclear. with many details omitted by the police. However, according to some witnesses, Maria and Casares had a violent argument in his dormitory that night. Subsequent to Maria Belón's disappearance, Cadet Sanchez, who was involved in the incident, later recounted disturbing details. According to Sanchez, Lieutenant Casares assaulted Maria Belén for at least 20 minutes, during which Maria Belén screamed in pain and pleaded for help. It was also revealed that a cadet, alarmed by Maria Belón's cries and requests for assistance, alerted a superior officer about the fight. However, the superior ordered the cadet not to intervene, insisting that no one should get involved in a husband and wife's problems. Despite at least 20 police members hearing the commotion, no one intervened to help the defenseless woman, and nothing was known of her whereabouts after that night. Cadet Sanchez recalled that Maria Belón's screams suddenly stopped, followed by a profound silence. Shortly thereafter, she heard Casares leaving the bedroom. Sanchez reported hearing Casares dragging something heavy, bumping against the stairs of the police residence. Although the police school sentry logged Maria Belón's entry, her exit was never recorded. On September 12th, Maria Belón's mother, Elizabeth, received a life-altering call. Around 2 p.m., Casares contacted her to inquire if Maria Belén was with her. According to Casares, his wife hadn't returned home following an argument while heading to their residence. He claimed that Maria Belén exited their car and took a taxi. Elizabeth pressured Casares to report Maria Belón's disappearance to the authorities, but he excused himself, saying his superiors wouldn't allow him to leave work for this task. Elizabeth, undeterred, requested one of Casares' superiors to permit him to file the report. That evening around 5:30, Maria Belón's disappearance was officially reported. The next morning, Casares provided a version of events to the police and was even taken to the avenue where he claimed his wife got into a taxi. However, he couldn't pinpoint the exact location where she supposedly crossed the busy avenue, an unlikely place for a taxi to stop in the middle of the night. In an interview with an Ecuadorian digital media outlet, Elizabeth recounted that when Maria Belón's disappearance was reported, police officers found small blood spots on Casares' mattress in his dormitory. When officers prepared to collect a sample, Casares objected, stating a judicial order was needed for such a procedure and insisting on the presence of his lawyer during any examinations. These events unfolded in front of Elizabeth, who actively followed the official search for her missing daughter from the beginning. Doubts about Casares' involvement grew. He was detained for 8 hours for investigative purposes, as the law allows, but was released after his statement because the prosecutor found insufficient grounds for pretrial detention. The following morning, Casares did not report to work at the police station. Neighbors reported that between 10:40 p.m. on September 13th and 4 a.m. on September 14th, Casares fled. Elizabeth recounted these events during her appearance before the National Assembly of Ecuador on September 27th, highlighting the irregularities in the case. Following the main suspect's escape, the prosecutor's office criticized the police for not surveilling Casares adequately. Following the disappearance of Maria Belén, the police institution reported that the order for surveillance of Lieutenant Casares, the main suspect, was issued after he had already fled. Maria's mother, Elizabeth, believed that the security forces and judicial system failed to ensure safety and due process, allowing the suspect to escape. Of the 20 police officials present at the party on the night of Maria's disappearance, including high-ranking ones who ordered others to remain silent, only Cadet Sanchez was arrested. She was accused of having heard the entire incident and not acting. Sanchez's lawyer told the media that she and Lieutenant Casares had a special friendship and denied any romantic relationship. Security cameras at the police school showed that Casares left the premises twice on the night of September 11th. The first time he was gone for 15 minutes, but the second time he was away for at least 4 hours. During this interval, Casares contacted a cadet identified as Nadesha M., a friend of Sanchez, whose house was searched by authorities on September 22nd. After Maria's disappearance, the Ecuadorian government offered a $20,000 reward for Casares' capture. Public scrutiny fell on Diego Ordóñez, the security secretary, and Patricio Carrillo, the interior minister, for their handling of the case. Ordóñez emphasized the importance of safeguarding the police's institutional reputation, while Carrillo had left the country amidst the case's uproar. In response to public pressure and protests demanding the truth about Maria's disappearance, Carrillo announced that the police school would be led by women. The police also started administrative processes against 12 members, ranging from colonel to sergeant, but no further arrests were made, leaving only Sanchez in custody. Elizabeth consistently demanded the truth about her daughter's fate. expressing frustration over the lack of case resolution on social media. Carrillo, then the Interior Minister, promised to resign if Maria was not found within 30 days. Subsequently, a large police contingent was deployed to search for Maria. Elizabeth criticized the police for not effectively searching for her daughter and recounted searching through garbage dumps and ravines herself. On September 21st, human remains were found near the police school. Later that day, President Guillermo Lasso and Minister Carrillo confirmed Maria's femicide via Twitter, vowing to bring the perpetrators to justice and offering condolences to her family. Carrillo apologized to Maria's family at a press conference covered by major media outlets. The case continued to draw significant public attention and scrutiny over the handling of the investigation and the search for the responsible parties. While Minister Carrillo was addressing the media, hundreds of citizens gathered in Quito to demand that the state not let the femicide of Maria Belén go unpunished, and to show her mother that she was not alone. The march, which traveled one of the city's main avenues and reached the police headquarters, was led by feminist organizations and accompanied by relatives of thousands of disappeared people in Ecuador. Amidst posters and photographs of Maria Belén, the demonstrators sang Canción San Mito, which has become an anthem of the feminist movement in the region with adaptations for the Ecuadorian case. A feminist activist who followed Maria Belén's case and publicly spoke about the police's actions and government blunders told the international news agency Infobae that the presence of hundreds of women on the streets was due to feeling mocked, vulnerable, and, above all, fed up. In a statement, 29 feminist organizations declared themselves in permanent mobilization until the full truth about the disappearance and femicide of Maria Belén was known. They rejected Minister Carrillo's version, which labeled the case as a crime of passion, minimizing the institutional complicities within the police that concealed the aggression, failed to intervene, and allowed the main suspects escape. On September 22nd, the Central University of Ecuador's theater, where Maria Belén earned her law degree, was filled with family, friends, activists, journalists, and citizens attending the wake in her honor. Elizabeth arrived at noon, accompanied by the funeral procession carrying her daughter's coffin. Mourning amidst media flashes and microphones, Elizabeth called for independent experts to investigate her daughter's case and demanded to know the truth. Maria Belén's son also attended the wake, and on September 23rd, Maria Belén was buried. Maria Belén Bernal's disappearance and murder have raised questions about police training and suspicions of a possible cover-up by Casara's officers and subordinates. The case has sparked a debate on whether Maria Belén's femicide should be considered a state crime. The incident shook Ecuador to the extent that on September 23rd, President Lasso, who described the lawyer's murder as femicide, asked for Minister Carrillo's resignation as Interior Minister, effective immediately. He also ordered the dismissal of 2 police generals, the National Director of Police Judicial Investigation and the Head of Citizen Security and Public Order. Additionally, President Lasso requested the resignation of the entire police high command and gave the police commander, Fausto Salinas, a week to deliver definitive results leading to Castro's capture. Since Maria Belén's body was found, suspicions about the investigators' inefficiency have increased. The police stated that the remains were wrapped in a blanket and buried in a steep hill. However, photographs of the site show a blanket in perfect condition, which, according to the official version, should have been buried for at least 10 days with a decomposing body. Salinas, the police commander, provided details of the autopsy and part of the investigations to an Ecuadorian radio station. However, Police Commander Salinas' statement that Maria died by strangulation has raised suspicions, especially since bloodstains were found in Castro's room and car when luminol was applied. This has led feminist organizations and several lawyers to argue that the police are both judge and party in this case, leading to calls for an impartial entity to ensure the investigation is conducted with the utmost transparency. While the police prioritize finding causaries and debates continue over state responsibility, the international community awaits the involvement of international experts and oversight by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in the investigation. Maria Belén's family is shattered. Her mother insists that Maria Belén should not become just another statistic among the 206 femicides recorded in Ecuador until September 3, 2022. Before the National Assembly, she demanded speed and transparency in the investigation. Protection was also requested for Maria Belén's best friend, who, since September 15th, had heard strong rumors about the location of the body, found only days later on September 21st. This suggests that authorities did not give due attention to this crucial information. Furthermore, this friend, whose identity is being protected, has received threatening calls from the police. Recent information indicates that Lieutenant Casares left Ecuador on the same day the police and prosecutor's office refused to detain him. Surveillance cameras captured him riding his motorcycle across Ecuador to the Colombian border. In Colombia, he traveled to Medellin, where he was last seen in his motorcycle, as reported by Colombian and Ecuadorian media on October 5, 2022. On December 30, 2022, he was arrested in Palomino, La Guajira, Colombia, while working as a bartender. Casares, the main suspect in Maria Bellén's femicide, was identified through his use of Ecuadorian slang, leading to his capture. He now faces 34 years and 8 months in prison, the maximum penalty in Ecuador for femicide as reported by local media.